All right, hello everyone and welcome.
Oh, geez.
Turn down your volume, yeah.
John, we caught that critter on camera. All right, we're gonna take it from the top. All right, everyone, welcome to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session. We have a specially scheduled work session today on Thursday, May 22nd. And thanks for everyone's patience as we wrestled with some technical difficulties. Hopefully everyone can see and hear at home. I just want to check in with Grassroots on the audio. Does it seem okay? Yeah. Okay, great, everyone. Thank you very much. Well, welcome. I'm going to turn this over. We're having a work session to discuss our modernization project at the Aspen-Pickens County Airport. And I will turn it over to County Manager John Peacock.
Great, thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulties this morning and the late start. For those viewing from home, we have a camera on the one monitor that's working, so if it doesn't quite look like the quality you're used to seeing with a direct feed, that's because it's not, and we apologize for that. But we will have all this information available. Today we're really here to talk about a couple of things. One is to give a brief update about where we are in the project, but we really want to spend the majority of our time following up on our retreat discussion about our program management structure for airport redevelopment and the need for both county and contracted resources so that the board understands where we're at in our evaluation at this point of what we need to have a successful project and complete things on the timeline that we're talking about. We've got a number of people in the room. I was going to do introductions with all, but I think I'm going to stick right up here right now. And Diane, will you kick us off?
Diane Jackson, Interim Airport Director.
Abraham Uman, Jacobson Daniels, part of the program management team.
Brad Jacobson, Program Management Team.
Meg Haynes, Vice Chair of the AAB and Liaison for the Terminal to You and the AAB.
And of course, John Peacock, County Manager. Everyone in the room has had a role in evaluating the information that we're going to be presenting today and here to provide answers to questions and such as we go along. So today we're going to do an overview of the program scope, talk about schedule and critical milestones. We have some updated cost estimates to present. Again, a lot of this is information the board's seen, so we're not planning on spending a lot of time with it. Where we do want to spend our time, though, is talking about the proposed program management structure, so you can see how roles and responsibilities are organized for the project. And then we're going to go through what we call a swim lane chart, which is really looking at different functions within the project, start to finish, that need to be fulfilled. And talk about, gosh, which one of these do we think we should be contracting out? Which ones will be handled by county staff, existing county staff, and where have we seen gaps that we want to be able to come back and ask the board for resources? Our goal is to get direction from you today to bring that request back formally in the form of a budget appropriation for those county resources. I did want to give Meg Haynes just a little bit of time because she's your liaison from the Airport Advisory Board. Meg has been sitting in with us Monday mornings, many other mornings, afternoons, maybe evenings, as we've been processing through. And I think it's important for you to understand kind of that oversight role that we continue to have with the AAB. So, Meg, I don't know if you had any opening comments you'd like to make.
So thank you for inviting me and for letting me join you with all the meetings. We have been having those Monday morning meetings, and I want to start off by saying we are finally here to talk about the terminal creating the terminal after 5, 7, however many years it's been. And I'm just pleased to do that. I'm actually very excited about it, finally. I appreciate being involved with John, and I also want to just start by saying, for whatever my opinion's worth, we are so lucky to have him managing this huge process. He has done so much work getting prepared, and you all will be hearing about the staff that you need and whatnot, and so it's a privilege to be here. In the Monday morning meetings, John has chaired the meetings for us to talk about how the organization should be, the staff that's needed. We've talked about the finances. You all know how expensive this is going to be, and hopefully we can get all the money. We also, he invited me to participate in the selection committee, and that was just quite a challenge. We had, whether you might know, we had 11 firms for the architectural selection present the proposals that were just amazing. As Brad said, from his experience, they all were good. But and the proposals, of course, came online. With the pages were at least 1,000 pages or more that we reviewed. And that was fun, my first experience in that. We met for 2 days doing that, and individually scored the proposals and narrowed them down to 5. And then we had 2 days of interviews with the 5 firms. That was just really, really fascinating, and did select one. I was on the selection committee without a vote, but my input representing the AAB was well received. It was just fun to do it all and just really fascinating to see that. Rich had originally, before the RFQs, the requests for qualifications, asked me to look at the draft and ask for my input, and I was very, very intent on making sure that the proposers, the architectural proposers, knew that there would be, Greg, to your point, a lot of good community input as we start. And so we did put that into the drafts, and each of the firms did speak about how they would do that in a listening way. We want to make sure that we don't get dictated to by the firms, but they listen to the community input that we will have. So we'll plan that very carefully. It's too early to talk about task forces now, but we will be doing that soon. I have quite a few drafts that I've been working on over the months about various kinds of task forces that we could have. So we'll be back to you soon with that. And so I think that's all I need to say now, except that I'm really looking forward to one of the FTEs that I know John is going to propose is a public information officer, PIO, and that position is going to be very much needed because, as we all know, we do need to get the community input up to a certain point. So thank you for letting me be here. I'll be here to answer any questions this morning.
Thank you so much, Meg. Go ahead and flip that.
And John, can I just jump in as to keep us organized? Will you be stopping for questions at certain points throughout this? Or so
Yeah,
we reserve ours for when
The
you-
board can just, I think it might be good as we're in the flow, if you have a question about what's being presented, to go ahead and exercise your chair prerogative, Kelly, to
I'm sure we
jump
also
in.
get through it too.
Yeah,
Maybe what we'll try to do is, unless something's really urgent, hold them till the end of each bullet here. And
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly divided up into, so if we can get through, for example, Brad's going to present organization charts for the program management organization, maybe get through those and go back and ask questions, and Then we'll get into the swim lane chart, and each swim lane is going to have a slide. So you'll have an opportunity. We'll stop at each one of those for conversation.
Thank you.
Diane, do you have another packet?
I do.
Oh, I may have stole yours and given it to Josie.
I think you did.
I thought it was mine. I apologize.
I don't mind being a victim. Thank you.
All right, we ready?
Anyway,
All right,
yeah, I'm not going to spend time on this. The mandate, we know what it is. You all lived it, and so this is really us moving forward to meet our community's needs. What I want to do now is turn it over to Brad Jacobson to talk about the scope and budget and where we are with the program management organization structure.
Thanks, John. Last time I was before you, we were talking about the ALP and finalizing that. That document reflects the community plan and assures that the FAA is on board and in concurrence with that plan. So that's kind of what we're going to be building, but it's a very big, complicated technical picture. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the scope. So there's really three groupings of projects that we're gonna try to accomplish in the next 5 years, right? So we have the runway project, and that is essentially demolishing the existing runway and reconstructing it 80 foot to the west, full length, 8,000 feet long, 150 foot wide. In addition to that, we're going to rehabilitate Taxiway Alpha and make sure that those connections that are now a little bit further apart are all kind of configured in the right way. And then we're going to do a little bit of work on the west side to relocate a portion of the vehicle service road and the bike path and the perimeter fence line to make everything kind of fit in that box. That's a big chunk of the project and a big complex undertaking. The second piece is the terminal and the terminal area improvement. So we have a new 90,000 square foot terminal, the associated aircraft apron that go with that, the parking, both surface parking and subsurface parking or elevated parking, whatever we decide to do there, rental car facilities, and roadways that connect all of that. Another sort of big, complex chunk of work. The third and final piece is on the west side. We've got a portion of Taxiway Bravo, a new taxiway on the west side that we're going to build that will allow us access to a general aviation apron that we are relocating from the east side to the west side, and it's going to provide the local pilots with a dedicated area, with a pilot's lounge, with self-serve gasoline, things that are going to improve their quality of life significantly. And it also helps us address some of the concerns that the FBO is going to do on their own. So those are the three big chunks. I will point out that there's also a de-icing pad expansion that's part of this. Right now it's in the terminal component, not the airfield component. It's a technicality. There's reasons why we're planning to do that, and we can talk more about that, but I just wanted to point that out. Any questions on the scope of work?
Francie.
Just a question about the de-icing pad. So I thought it was possible that the runway would be completed and then we'd keep the same terminal while a new terminal is being constructed, but we'll need de-icing then, so how does that work?
Correct. So we're going to construct the new de-icing pad in the summertime. We just haven't determined which summer we're going to do that in. But we're going to maintain the existing de-ice pad until such time as we're confident we can complete the construction of the new pad before the winter season comes. Okay. So there will be no point at which we do not have de-icing facilities when we need them.
Great, thank you.
Greg.
Quick question. Connectivity between the east side and the west side, say a passenger gets off a private aircraft and has to get over to the passenger terminal some way, does that require going all the way around, or there's no connectivity across the field?
Going really fast.
Can't run across the runway, we know that.
There's no vehicle connectivity, yeah. It would be essentially the same as it is today, Commissioner.
Right.
They're at the far north end of the east side, and if they had to get to the far south end of the east side, they would have to figure out some mechanism, and it's the same now
Private
with the
taxis.
east.
And-
Yeah.
Thank you,
Just
okay.
to add a little clarification to that, where we would have them on the west side would be the private pilots that are locally based here. So anybody handling with Atlantic would still have that access on the
They'd
east side
still
like
have
they
east
do
side
today.
access. And then if there was, I know, future accommodation, which may or not be necessary for a vertiport. And that's on the west side, isn't it?
No,
It's not, okay.
we're contemplating the vertiport in the future would be on the east side.
I guess I forgot. Thank you.
Patty?
Mine's really simple. We are just guesstimating the 90,000 square feet for a terminal. That's still yet to be definitely determined, depending upon design, et cetera. Okay.
The 90,000 square feet was dictated in the common ground recommendations, and our directive has been to accommodate, fulfill the common ground recommendations. So we have validated that a 90,000 square foot terminal is viable, but as we go through design, there will be decisions that need to be made
Right.
around that.
Depending upon design and community input. Thank you.
So where are we at in the process? We've completed the planning. You went through an exhaustive community involvement process. We've gone through the ALP, another rather exhaustive process, and we've got FAA buy-in. So that was a very big step. Congratulations on that. We're in the process of going through the environmental approval, and I'll review that when I get into the schedule, but what we're following the FAA prescribed process for that. In addition, we are evaluating the funding sources for the project. So we're doing some planning and we're doing some modeling and some scenarios on which buckets of money, sources of funds we're going to use for this project. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the funding side of it. As Meg said, we're in the design process. We've selected designers. We're in the process of negotiating scopes and contracts over the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll be in the design process very soon. From there, we have to enter into agreements with contractors. So we'll be doing that a little bit later on in the process after we get into design, somewhere between 30 and 60%. We're contemplating doing a CMR delivery process. So we'll be using a construction manager at risk. They will come in the middle of the process and help us with pre-construction activities and construction activities. And again, we'll talk a little bit, I'll give you a little bit more flavor on that when we get into the schedule. And then finally, it's, commissioning and operation and ribbon cutting and kind of the fun stuff. But I would point out, sometimes it feels like we've gone through a big process, but we really still are at the beginning, right? We're just starting design, so I just want to make that clear that there's a long road to go and there's a lot of stuff we still need to do, even though we've accomplished a lot to this point. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. I'm just going to walk through these items sort of top to bottom. Environmental review, we are in the process. We are on schedule. We're going to be completed sometime around the end of the year. Nothing of any note that causes any concern on our side. We're following the FAA's process, and we anticipate getting environmental review, environmental approval. At the same time that we're doing the environmental review, we are also doing the financial planning. And so, as I said, right now we're doing some planning and modeling. Recondo is running a bunch of scenarios and kind of help us understand the magnitude of the situation that we're in and how we're going to possibly fund and source those funds. We're also getting ready to go out and solicit proposals for a financial advisor, municipal advisor, who will then help us determine the size and the timing of the bonds and how we go through that process. And they will actually help us go all the way through that process to where we're actually issuing bonds for the project. And then the work's not over. Once we have the money, we have to kind of track it and monitor and report back how we are spending all those funds, and that will continue through the life of the project. Now let's talk about the two projects, the runway and the terminal. And I know that I explained there were three kind of projects. They're sort of interweaving. Like, think about it as the airfield and then the terminal side. So on the airfield side, we've solicited designers. We're going through negotiation. We're going to be in design very soon. We're going to do that design over the next 3 quarters, we estimate. Somewhere in the middle of that, around 30 to 60%, we're going to go out and solicit for a CMR to help us with that runway construction project. The reason we are doing that as a CMR, or at least contemplating it at this point as a CMR, is we are endeavoring to demolish and rebuild that runway in a single season. So we want all the help that we can get to make sure that we can do that and have that runway available in the fall when we need it before the ski season starts and tourists start flocking into town. So we're going to have pre-construction activities. We're going to have the designers working. We're going to have the program management team working. Everybody's going to be focused on making sure that that runway project goes according to plan. Right now it's scheduled for the spring, summer, and fall of 2027, but we will be doing enabling project work in 2026 to give ourselves the best chance of being successful in 2027. So that's kind of the runway time frame.
Brad, can I jump in? Oh.
Would you like to go ahead? Maybe you'll answer my
I just want to flag the note at the top of this. There is going to be some policy decisions that will need to come back to this board in order for us to make this 3 quarters. And that is construction would need to be allowed to happen in 2 shifts, and it would need to be allowed to happen 7 days a week, which would be a variance request to this board around noise, nighttime, and holiday work. That would come back to this board in the form of a resolution. If we are not able to do this in 2 shifts with those variances, it's likely this closure would need to be doubled, or at least extended another 2 to 3 quarters, and I'd bargain 3. And so that's kind of the policy choice. We felt that because of the economic impact potentially to the community, shortening that window was more important. So that's something I want to be sure you have on your radar screens coming out today.
And then the question I had is related to the construction manager at risk. Is that the type of contract where they have incentives and penalties built in for timely delivery? Like, what is the nature of that choice? And
Yeah,
why?
you have the ability and the option to put incentives or penalties in those contracts. Historically, the penalties are very difficult to enforce, so the industry has moved to an incentive-based program. But there are mechanisms that we can put into the contract that would, I think, accomplish what you're suggesting.
I see.
Unknown
Sorry.
caller.
About that. Okay, other questions on this? Francie?
Will the destruction of the current runway be concurrent with the beginning of the construction of the new runway, or are they segued?
We don't have that level of sequencing defined yet. My guess is that the demolition can occur in inclement weather, so we can start as early in the spring as we're able to, as to get the community on board with, okay, April 1st, April 10th, April 15th. I'm assuming the last, following the closure of the ski slopes would be when we set it.
Mm-hmm.
My observation is the weather can be a little hinky around here that time of year, and construction activities aren't great, but demolition activities are fantastic. So I'm anticipating they're going to be in the demolition phase, and as soon as they can start constructing, they will do that, and they will, if those overlap, they will be concurrent. We're gonna staff it so that we can accomplish both.
Great, thank you.
No doubt it'll be an outstanding ski year when we plan.
Right, so we're gonna stay open until May.
Yes, Patty?
Bonding, are we then, bonding question on the ballot? Do we have a time frame? We still haven't discussed whether it's gonna be this year or
Yeah, so we need to bring that back to you. We're looking to get our municipal advisor in place, but it's likely to be this year, either a bond question with no taxes associated with it, or a home rule charter amendment.
Greg?
Just regarding, when are we going to talk about the decision to do it all in one season with double shifts versus a 2-year span? And I'm assuming the considerations are light pollution and noise pollution. I don't know what else is on there, but.
You're exactly right. It's within our environmental health regulations and code. We want to bring our designers on board and really double check this timeline before we bring that forward to you, so that we are bringing the folks who are responsible for meeting this schedule. So it will be closer to the actual construction.
Okay.
But it's important that and if this board has reservations about those conversations, and we want to have at least conceptually that conversation earlier, we need to flag that for staff, because that would affect our project and the impact on the community significantly.
I just want to say, I think it's certainly worth exploring, and hopefully we'll have criteria to give to them as they decide if they can do that, right? We'll have noise and light criteria. They have to work in the dark, you know.
And we'll have a better sense too of what those construction impacts are. You know, are we having on-site asphalt plant or plants?
Right.
What would those operations look like? We'd like to have a little bit more of that information on the table before we bring it back to you specifically.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
So moving on to the terminal project, very similar sort of structure with some subtle differences. Again, we're in the selection process for the design, and we're hoping to get into design, have a scope and a contract negotiated in the next couple of months. We'll be into design. We'll start that sometime in the end of the third quarter. The design's going to take a little bit longer for the terminal, a little bit more complexity, and a little bit more public involvement. So we've built in some extra time there, but similar to the runway, around the 30 to 60% design period, we're going to bring on a CMR to help us with pre-construction, constructability reviews, and make sure that we can take advantage of that closure, the runway closure in 27, to get a lot of the infrastructure associated with the terminal done. And the reason we want to do that is we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that closure, so that when we open back up at the end of 27, we've got all the temporary facilities in place so that we can operate the existing terminal with as minimal operational impacts to the traveling public and the employees as possible. So most airports don't close for 9 months, so you have to kind of work through the construction. I think we've all experienced how uncomfortable and painful that can be. We have an opportunity to kind of do all that stuff while there's nobody around, and then open back up and not be moving stuff back and forth. So we have some goals that we're trying to accomplish. The timing seems to line up. We have a plan to accomplish it, and we're very confident that we can do so.
Patty?
So, that being said, when we do the closure, which by the way, I won't be here, but I'll be watching carefully, we would have some area at the airport where we could do staging for ground transportation for people who needed to, say, come from Grand Junction or from Eagle. So that's kind of the hope, that we would have that moved along far enough with that in mind, that we could use that as our ground transportation center. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and we have similar concerns with the rental car facilities.
Right.
Because they're used by the community, not just the airport travelers.
Right.
So I think I don't have a solution yet, but we know of the situation, and we're addressing it proactively.
Because I get that question asked a lot from when I sit on the Aspen Chamber Board, the timing and how we're going to work out those logistics. Okay.
Yeah, the
great.
So you
people aren't
mean
going to
having-
stop coming. They're just going to stop flying in. So.
You mean having the rental things open during the closure so that the community can?
Correct.
Oh,
And some of these logistics too will very much depend on the design and our CMR. You know, is any of this going to be built in a modular fashion and brought in and constructed? Is it all done on site? That changes where staging happens, where work is happening, and all of that. We don't have answers to those questions right now, but that'll be part of
It's
the
in the
design
thought
process.
process.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Greg?
Just a thought, as we're trying to figure out getting people to and from the valley, have we reached out to Bustang, the state, about maybe actually having a Bustang that comes up here?
We have not had those conversations yet, but we could certainly put that in our list of options as
Just-
we're
yeah.
seeing where workforce is going to be needed.
Just
Yeah.
a seamless thing for people trying to get here from Denver, DIA or Eagle, or just wondering, maybe that's a RAFTA thing. I should know that, but.
I did bring it up at the Raptor meeting, though, to put it on their schedule, what it looked like our timetable was going to be, and so.
Right.
But then we have core too, the Eagle County Transportation, so it might be a combination there.
Right. There's a fix in there somewhere. Thank you.
I have a very simple question. Is one design team doing both projects?
No. And you're going to have a similar question, I would assume, when we go to the CMR, because you have the option of hiring a single CMR or going two. Right now, we're assuming and proposing 2 CMRs just to, again, limit the risk of the runway not being completed in time. But that's obviously, that will be ultimately your decision.
Thank you.
Okay, moving from the schedule to the budget. Here's a very high-level, planning level cost estimate. The total cost of the 3 elements that we have been discussing is right around $520 million. And it is not lost on anyone on our team, the significance of this price tag. And I think that it should only reinforce the magnitude and complexity of the project that you're undertaking. It's a planning level cost estimate, but we're confident that it is in the right ballpark. So we're going to do about $40 million worth of design work in the next few years, which is a whole lot of money. And then we're going to do a whole bunch of construction after that, because we've got a big complex project to do.
What gives you confidence in these estimates?
The level of detail that went into developing them. And
Drawn on like recent projects and similarly
recent
situated?
projects, local input, local information. There's, because it's a planning level, it has a fair level of contingency involved because there's things we don't know. But the questions that I've asked, they've gone to the detail of understanding what the workforce issues are in the community and what the premium for getting people on site and housed and et cetera, would be. They've used, recent cost estimates. They've considered the tariffs. We don't know how that's going to go, but it's not like they said, "Oh, gee, I didn't think of that." These are very detailed estimates for a planning level. We literally gave them a drawing and said, "What is this?" Now they asked us a few questions, but I think these are realistic. I believe these numbers are realistic.
John, do you want to reply and then I'll go to
Well,
Francie?
yeah, and I just wanted to note for the board, there are some elements that are outside this scope that we may endeavor to do around battery energy storage projects and additional solar projects and such that we may look to scope that would add to this. The other thing, as Brad was talking about, this being an indicator of the kind of size and complexity of this project from a governance perspective, what does not have numbers to this, but we still have oversight responsibility for, is the fixed-based operator. And so we know we have a minimum of $105 million in capital investments from the fixed-based operator. Could be more than that. It will definitely not be less than that. that will also be part of our governance and oversight when we're talking about the complexity of the project.
Francie.
A couple of questions. I'm a little confused about the extra zeros on the construct West Side Taxiway and the bottom line there.
Typo.
Okay. And then, is design usually around 10% of construction? Is that sort of the,
Yeah, rule of thumb, yes.
okay.
I think we've used 8 in this,
Yeah. It looks like it until you get to the very bottom. Yeah,
We like all
yeah,
those zeros.
yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
And I will point out that the other, we sort of separated out design because we wanted to have an idea of what the, sort of the initial investment was gonna be to get us going. But there are other soft costs like program management and permitting and
Right.
a number of things. Those are all right now sitting in the construction cost. So we'll eventually break this down into hard construction costs and everything else when we have more definition around those. Right now, they're just lumped in as a percentage of construction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Greg.
Two quick ones, just, I drove up the valley recently and I saw the elk herd trying to get through the fence, and there was like 40 of them running up and down along the fence, trying to figure out how they're gonna cross. And the next couple days, I think I saw one carcass, so one of them made it through and got hit. Is that part of, there's a safety issue, I understand, with carrying, birds, at the north end of the runway on birds, and that's, I didn't realize that was actually something that concerned the traffic control. And I'm just wondering, is that part of the scope to try to solve that one? And then the second question is, how large is the workforce, and have you considered a man camp on site? I was thinking about the construction of Rudai Reservoir and the dam, which brought about Elgebel, back in the day. And I'm just
Great
wondering, it'd save a lot of commuters on the highway if, just want to throw it out as a possibility. I don't know if it's a good idea, just wanted to.
We're on the same page. We are considering that. Obviously, that's not our decision to make, but we would like to come with a proposal based on input from the construction managers on how best to do that. We've started identifying locations where we could do that. And again, to your point, having them on airport property would be the best because it keeps them off of 82 and the congestion issues that we have in the mornings and the evenings. The FAA is a little bit hesitant to approve even temporary housing inside of on an airport because of land use requirements and stuff. But I think the unique situation here, I think it's definitely worth having a conversation. And we're doing the planning to get to understand the feasibility of that, and we'll be involving that in the design teams. In fact, several of the design teams brought it up in the interviews.
Right.
And then you were
I was just
nodding
going to
when
say, I can
mentioned
try
it.
to address some of the wildlife issues. Even aside from this project, we have a whole section of our airport certification manual that handles wildlife. And on the side, we're working with Safe Passages, too, because they're very interested in that elk migration across the airport and up onto Shale Bluff. So we are keeping a very close eye on that
Great.
and doing
Thank-
anything we can
thank
do to
you. Just
protect
want to
that.
make sure, yeah. The elk aren't going anywhere apparently, so we got to figure that one out.
We all love watching them, so it's in our best interest to protect them as well.
Good. Okay, let's move on to program management.
Are we on pace to be done in an hour?
It's so weird to see that screen because it's
two.
like,
Yeah, great.
2
Okay.
hours.
Well,
Well, we have to do exactly.
I'm just going to skim over some
No,
stuff.
it's okay. I want to give it its time.
Yeah,
If we
yeah.
need to keep
Yeah.
us moving, I want to, please tell me that.
How do you want me to?
I would get into the organization, the
Okay.
organization.
And again,
Yeah.
don't rush, but we'll just keep our
Okay,
flow.
you're good, Brad. Keep
Program
going.
charter, I think, is important, and I would encourage you to set that up. It's very similar to what you've already done with your resolutions, and it just establishes clarity up front. And if we don't do that, we're going to constantly be coming back to it. So I would just encourage you to kind of formalize that. But the real meat of it is in the program management plan, and this is where we talk about the scope, the schedule, the budget, how we're going to fund this. who has authority, how are we governing the project, and sort of the roles and responsibilities of each of the team members. And so I'm going to kind of go into some details of how we're establishing it at this point. So our proposed program management structure has the BoCC at the top, and you're the project owner, so you have ultimate approval, right? So you approve the scope, the schedule, and the budget, and all of the decisions related to that. You have the Airport Advisory Board who will recommend to you items on scope, schedule, and budget for your approval, and they will serve as supplemental eyes and ears out there because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And importantly, the Airport Advisory Board is going to lead these project task force that are ensuring that the common ground recommendations are integrated into the terminal building in the, I would say, the best possible way, right? Because it's a little bit subjective. So they'll be feeding you information. The county staff, led by John and Diane, but supplemented by a whole bunch of other people in this building and probably outside of it, are going to direct all of the activities related to planning, design, construction, and operation through this process. So they'll be directing the project management team, the other project consultants, the design team, the contractors. They're going to be directing them based on the information that the approvals that you give them. They're the execution piece of this. I think if you look at the drawing, it's probably not very clear because it's set up as an organizational structure, and it's really a process or a flow diagram, right? So we've talked about best information available based on the plan. This is where we're at. Here's our scope, here's our schedule, our sequencing plan, here's our budget, and we're working on how we're going to fund this, what our sources and uses of funds are, how much bonding we're going to need, how much money we're going to get from the FAA, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to give that to you. I've just given it to you, except for a few details, right? But that's not the end of it. We're going to get more definition and more precision and more clarity on all of those things as we go forward, from today to hiring the designer to moving forward. We're going to keep coming back to you with new information on scope, schedule, and budget for your approval. So it's just going to evolve as we get better definition, better precision, better clarity on things. We will present that to you. Any questions about that approach?
Got any fun coming in here anywhere?
I'm sorry?
Got any fun coming in here anywhere?
I say this is as fun as it gets.
He's smiling now. We're gonna capture that one, that
A
smile.
lot of TVDs.
Yeah, so let's talk about how we do that. So from program management structure, right, you'll continue to see Abe and myself as the oversight of the project, but we're going to need some people on site full-time dedicated to this project. We think it's around 7 to 10 people. We've got 2 people dedicated to the comms team, and they're working with the county staff. We're going to have an executive director, and we'll have somebody responsible for the airfield projects and somebody responsible for the terminal project who will be directed by the executive. And then we're going to have a controls person to manage the documents and the finances and the
All from Jacobson?
all from us. Those are all hired staff.
Yeah, okay.
And then we've partnered with GBSM, Miles Graham, and Melissa Dumont from Kimley Horn to handle the communication side of it, because we're acutely aware of the need to coordinate the messaging and make sure that everyone is staying on track, and that the public involvement is as rigorous as it needs to be to ensure that we're accomplishing the common ground recommendations.
And I'm already working with them on the communications.
And so then what about communication with Washington? Will that come out of our staff or for our regular lobbyists or?
Yeah, and actually, we should see Jessica Moynihan might be on here. I don't know if we promoted her, but Cozen is also part of these conversations now. And so we'll be coordinating with them on those key conversations with the FAA in Washington, and that'll be the responsibility of Diane, myself, and board members as you appoint.
Okay, great.
Okay. Sorry, Jessica, I knew you were here. We forgot to promote you.
Did we? Welcome, nice to have you. Did we not need to RFP for this additional communications?
It was part of the scope, yeah. It was part of the scope for Jacobson Daniels in terms of oversight on public engagement.
And you just happened to hire the same firm that worked on the vision process and all that?
There was some intention there, actually.
Who would you hire? Yeah,
I
they've
just
been
worry
helping
they're a
us
little
through the
stretched.
ALP
They're also
process.
working with us on some other very significant work at the county.
Yeah.
So that would be my concern about their capacity. Greg?
I just want a brief question about checks and balances. Who's paying attention to all the details that could go off the rails, and who's checking on them? Like, do we have a redundant system to make sure efficiencies are met
Yeah.
and money's not trickling out some way? Or
If we could parking lot that question, that gets into the swim lane charts that we're going to do
Okay.
in a little bit. Yep.
got it.
So then we've kind of listed out, you know, for your consideration and review, kind of what the roles and responsibilities of all those positions are. But I think for our discussion today, I'd like to keep it at, you know, it's probably, in our estimation, it's 7 to 10 people. We're probably going to start with 4 or 5. We're going to build that up and determine how much we need based on the workload. It's going to vary, which is one of the reasons you hire a program manager instead of trying to do it in-house, because when it goes down, we can offload people, and when it comes back up, we can onboard people.
Kelly.
Francie?
And where will they live?
Well, some are going to be here.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Some are, yeah, we have to, they're going to live in the community, and we're going to have to.
In all those available spaces that we have in the community.
Do you have any rooms to rent out?
Are you trying to hire from the community, or will these be people that you already have tapped through Jacobson Daniels and bringing them in?
Both. We are looking to fill positions, and we're looking in the community, and I'm encouraged by who we have. But there are also some expertise that probably doesn't exist in the community, at least related to airports. So we'll be looking to bring those in.
All right, keep going. Thank you.
I think that kind of wraps up my piece, John. Do you want to?
Yeah, so that was the overall kind of flow and how the decision process would work. We want to get a little bit more granular, and Greg, I think this will start to get at the question you were asking, which is why we parking lotted it. The swim lane chart really is not about kind of the flow and organization. It's about identifying key functions from the start of the project to the end of the project, the closing of the project, that need to be fulfilled, and identifying then those roles, general roles that we're going to need to fulfill them. I did give you an eye test chart here. I'm going to go through this in more detail. You'll be able to see it probably easier within the presentation. But there's some color coding that I was hoping would make it simpler, but perhaps makes it a little bit more complicated. You'll see that there's a big pink box in the background on the top part of this chart. And that's to signify these are all functions around project governance and where we're really looking for checks and balances. And so this is where you're going to see how we're mixing up existing county staff, contracted resources that we're looking to bring in and roles, and then in some cases gaps where we want to fill those roles with new county staff. And so we're going to talk about that, and this really has a lot to do with exactly the question you're asking, Greg, is do we have checks and balances? We talked about that a lot over the past month or so. But how do we construct this to ensure we have appropriate oversight, to ensure that there's competitive sourcing, that there's cost containment and control, that we're going back and auditing appropriately to make sure that we've got the controls in place, and that it's not all sitting under one head, but that we've divided those responsibilities up and accountability up to ensure appropriate checks and balances.
I would just like to add that in my career, I've seen various kinds of charts or whatnot like this. And when John presented this on one of our Monday morning meetings, I was absolutely awed. I said, wow, this is a very good way of looking at the checks and balances. And so I commend how you sorted it out.
Thank you.
Well, it's true.
So I'm going to go through some of these probably a little bit more quickly than others. We've talked about your role as the project owner and director, and ultimately decisions to move forward and even grants of discretion to move the project forward come to this board. So we're going to be coming to you at critical points in the design process, particularly on the terminal, to do check-ins with you. Are we in the right spot? Here's what the Airport Advisory Board is recommending in terms of appropriate compromises to meet the community's vision. And here's how we're doing it from a vision perspective. Here's how we're trying to deal with some of the gnarly issues of how are we going to deal with workforce? Where is this thing actually getting constructed and assembled, and those sorts of things. Ultimately, at critical milestones, we're going to be bringing that back to you. And this board, if you don't approve it, we got to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. AAB is in the advisory capacity, and we have AAB members really embedded, as you're seeing with Meg, in different parts of the process right now. Executive sponsor, Brad talked about that role too. We're on the ground representing you in the project in more detail and making sure that we're doing the type of work that we're doing today. What are the resources that we need? How do we ensure success? Are we on track? And that really falls to the county manager's office and our airport director. Now just pause there and see if there are any questions on that before we. And then we get into the Executive Project Management Office. That's also what Brad described with the previous charts. That we've entirely contracted out already at this point to Jacobson Daniels. This is going to be a dynamic team. There's going to be project managers with different disciplines, as well as overall program managers, and then executive sponsors from Jacobson Daniels, making sure that this, what's going to be a high-profile project stays on track. The project management office, program management office at the end of the day is really responsible for ensuring we're balancing three things. Well, I hope I got this right, Brad. But it's really, are we managing the finances? Are we managing time? And are we managing quality? And typically you're having to compromise at some level between those three things. And are we making the compromises that make sense and reflect this community's values? That's what we're relying on this group for, with oversight and checks and balances coming from county staff, as we'll talk about a little bit. Any questions on that swim lane? We only have like 27 more to go. As we get in,
I have a general question
yes.
that applies to all, so I was going to save it, but maybe it makes sense to
Yeah,
ask her at the top. Why wouldn't each of these end with a county role? Like if I'm reading it left to right as all the individuals and all the roles that are involved in this check and balance, why wouldn't the county be the last stop as sort of
So it's not a flow.
Or the BoCC, or, you know, like
Yeah.
really the entity of accountability for this whole project.
Instead of thinking about it horizontally, think about it vertically. And so that role really comes to the project owner director. You are the last stop on this in terms of accountability for the organization, followed by your management team, which is myself and Diane. So if you think about those roles vertically, that's why we have the project owner and director at the top and the executive sponsor
But
at the
okay,
top.
so then how are we, like, when you get further down and I look at, you know, terminal design and engineering, I guess I'm not totally clear on how all of the work of these different roles functions to have accountability with the BoCC with.
So if you
project
go
owners.
back, you really should go back to the flow charts that Brad presented. So the construction, construction manager at risk and design all fall under this board. Your executive staff, the program management, I keep saying project, but it's really program management team. And that's why we wanted to present those first. The swim lanes were making sure that we identified the different roles that needed to be filled
Okay.
in order to achieve each of these functions.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Makes, yes,
Okay.
Can I ask
yes,
you
Greg.
same thing another way? If something goes off the rails, how does it get back to us? How does it trickle back up to us?
That's going to be our responsibility between Diane and I. We'll be working and relying heavily on our program management team and project managers. Part of their job is to flag risks that are either potential or realized during the project and roll those up to us. If that exceeds our ability to manage within whatever budget, we're not going to bring every problem to you or we wouldn't get, but if we are running into an we just found a really big boulder where we didn't think there was going to be one when we're digging a hole, and we just blew some of our excavation budget on the terminal or runway. And we're going to need additional appropriations or financing, or we're going to have to do some value engineering that changes the scope. We're going to be bringing that to you.
And I
Thanks.
may assist here a little bit too on a more granular level. There are several meetings that occur on a weekly, monthly,
Yeah.
even multiple times a week at the staff level. And like John said, if it's something large enough, we'll bring it to you. But those coordination meetings, even in regular construction projects, happen on a weekly basis at our staff level.
I wasn't thinking giant boulder, although that's possible. I was thinking like underground river or something.
Oh, yeah, that could happen too, or a lava tube, whatever realization. It could be a funding risk, right, that we realize in the project that causes us to reevaluate scope. So that's why we're establishing the organization and responsibilities the way we are, so that issues can be rolled up where they need to be rolled up, addressed quickly, and we can keep the project on schedule.
Great, thanks.
In terms of financing, this is really led by Ann and Liz in the back of the room with support. We have our airport financial and feasibility consultant. You've had them in front of you. That's Ricondo and Associates. We are out to RFP right now on a municipal advisor. We haven't done a bond issuance of this size or nature, and so we wanted to make sure that's such an important role that we were shopping the market before we went out and started to construct this financing.
Could you just fill in about what a municipal advisor is?
Yeah, so, and feel free if you want to come up too for municipal advisor, but what the municipal advisor does is they are going to sit with us. It's kind of like when you're getting a mortgage in a way, when you have a loan officer who's saying, okay, here are your revenue sources. Here's how you can construct a bond offering to achieve the best interest rates. Here's likely who the purchasers are going to be. Here's ways that you can structure it to, either manage risk or make it more or less marketable. here's how much we think you can reasonably finance with the cash flow and such that we are getting based on the work of our airport feasibility consultants.
Can I ask one more? So what's the difference between that and the bond council?
So bond counsel is legal counsel. So they are
Around
going to
the
be
bond.
correct. So they will be providing the legal advice. And there's actually other roles that aren't ours in this. There will be another attorney, general counsel, that will be providing disclosures for investors, and there's going to be underwriters in all of this for the bond issuance. So there are other roles that we'll be interfacing with, but our responsibility is really to have our own airport, kind of cash flow finance folks are helping us negotiate and manage the leases and project the revenues. The municipal advisors taking those and advising us on how we can package those different revenue sources into a marketable bond issue and what that's likely to look like. And then the bond council is helping us deal with legal issues, everything from does the ballot question you had voted on really authorize this issuance, and managing the risk. And Kutek Rock is who we use for that.
Patty.
So will we have a possible two options for bonding questions? One with if we lose the tax exempt status of muni bonds, and one with the status staying as it is?
And that's
Because we
part
don't
of,
know what's happening at the federal level.
and that's exactly what our municipal advisor
That's what
would be helping us with, is looking at, hey, here's some of your risk. If we are not able to issue tax exempt bonds, here's your basis point risk and what it means for what you can bond in total against the revenues that you have. It will be less,
So,
if
so
we
they'll give
lose
us
that.
a example of here's if this happens and here's if this.
Right. And that's a level of analysis and understand the markets that we just don't have at the staff level to do.
Okay.
So those would all be contracted out. Procurement. This is going to be really vital also. Not just these initial RFPs and contracting that we're doing for our design firms, our construction manager at risk and such, but there's going to potentially be subs that are either handled through those generals or there's going to be a number of change orders we would expect throughout a project of this scope and such, all of which are going to have to be tracked. We're going to be looking at, hey, does this pricing make sense for the change order? Does, are there alternatives for acquisition or procurement that would make the project either work better or be more cost effective? This is going to be a very, very busy portion, particularly up front, but really throughout the life of the project until we close it out. We have existing procurement manager and procurement specialists who are working with us on these procurement issues now. Within the Jacobson Daniels team, the program management team will be looking for support in terms of putting RFP documents and scopes together, helping us understand the state of the markets and where we are in acquisition and such, helping us evaluate change orders and those sorts of things. That would be working with our own staff, so we have some of those checks and balances, Greg, there. The board recently improved admin support. That's fantastic. That's going to be really, really important for us to keep up with the level of and just bulk of work that's going to be coming our way. We do have proposed on here, and I forgot to go over the key. The golden color is existing staff, green is contracted staff, and what we'll call peach or flesh color, it's an unfortunate color choice, I guess. Those are proposed FTEs. We are not proposing an addition right away to procurement. We kind of want to see how we build out with the support through our program management office, but we do see that there is potential that we would need additional procurement support throughout the scope of the project. So we do have a pending one we may bring back, but we're not asking for it right now on this.
Quick question, just this distinction between a probationary, or what do you call it, a temporary? A temporary employee versus an FTE. If the project is 7 years and it's an FTE for that period, but at the end of that period, do you still need that team?
Some of these, and we'll get to that in some later slides. Sorry, I keep parking lighting your questions. You just have good anticipation, Greg.
Just so far ahead of you.
I know. There are some of these positions that we see running with the life of the project. There are others actually that we see ongoing need for, and so we'll talk about that too. In terms of this procurement specialist, I think it would definitely run the life of the project, and I think what we would want to evaluate then is, are we picking up a major jail or public safety project or something after that would have that scope continue. Here's where we get into, I think, some of the controls, Greg, in particular, that you were concerned about. We have budget and cost control, and accounting and audit controls. And this is where we probably have the most position requests right now to manage. And so, of course, again, we have on the budget and cost control, we have Ann Driggers, and we have Connie Baker, our budget director. We are seeing the need for additional support, particularly on the budget side, with Connie as we're going through this, both tracking where we are, how we're doing against budget, making budget amendments as necessary with you all. We're seeing that need.
Exclusive to this project.
Exclusive to this project. However, it turns out that Connie may not choose to work forever. And she's given us she's given us a really big heads up that in the next 4 to 5 years, she may look to transfer to that next chapter for her. Nothing set in stone, but we're also viewing this as an opportunity, as we have in the past when we've hired positions to overlap and do a lot of knowledge transfer. So we're seeing this as an opportunity to do that and to fulfill this need while the project's going on.
Succession planning.
It's succession planning.
Budget directors are planners.
Yeah, I know, right? As it turns out.
Yeah.
She does 5-year budget plans and 5-year life plans.
There you go.
But we are looking for that support. That would be a new position, presumably for the life of this project, but we'd also be looking at it as a succession planning opportunity. In terms of accounting and audit, again, we have Ann Driggers and Liz, who are going to be taking lead on providing those checks and balances. Project accounting, we'll have a lot of that coming through our program management office, but we're also going to want to have some internal checks and balances on that. There are 2 positions based on workload that we see as being critical right now. The first is an internal auditor. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but the internal auditor would do a number of functions. One, they'd be looking at our overall finance control mechanisms to be sure that we've got appropriate approval processes, documentation processes, that sort of thing, so that we are able to ensure we have the systems in place to track those costs and account for costs, so that the information we're getting on the budget side can have good confidence in. They would also be responsible for doing some spot auditing to ensure that those systems that we've put in place are functioning as they're supposed to. So document sampling, those sorts of things. The other role that we see for the internal auditor is one we'll talk about a little bit later, but we have an FBO lease that has a lot of complex now revenue sharing kind of opportunities that we would like to be able, we wrote into the agreement the ability to audit it, but we need somebody to get in and do those spot audits to make sure that the revenue share that's coming back is what it's supposed to be. We had talked about contracting that out, but we think it may be more efficient for the organization overall to have that internal audit function that covers those needs during the project. We've also identified, and this is something Liz can speak to more if you want, that doing more internal controls evaluation and auditing throughout other departments in the organization would be beneficial and would help support our external audit. So because the FBO lease is a 30-year lease and we have these other organizational needs, we would request this as an ongoing position. We think it's critical to have as a check and balance internally during this project in particular.
Francie.
Will this be part of the county's overall budget and audit that we see, that we always see, that gets all these great marks from people who look at it?
Yeah.
Or will it be separate?
It'll be, and Liz, I don't know if you want to address this, but I'll go ahead and answer it, and you can correct me while you're coming out.
She can sit over here.
So this position will not
Slide the
replace the
mic over.
external audit. We need a third-party arm's length external audit, and we need a third-party single audit for federal funds. But what this position should be doing is supporting that process with data and with helping us flag risk areas that we want our third party to look at.
Yeah. So our external auditors do really small sampling. They look at only, a couple transactions throughout the year. And so what we've been seeing is that there are, the complexity of the county finances, the numbers of transactions, the amount of money that is flowing through the county has changed exponentially over the last, basically since I've been here, so over the last 9 years or so. And so there's this need that a lot of, is actually a GFOA recommendation, is that you have an internal audit function. And what that allows us to do is to look at all of the different transactions that are going through. So there's obviously higher risk right now with fraud as well. We keep hearing about different fraud cases. This internal auditor would be helping us make sure that we have processes in place so that we are not the next headline, basically. They will be making sure that we have things that can prevent fraud, not only in this project, but also throughout the county and all of our other things like our solid waste center and the library. I mean, library is really low scale of money that we're talking about in the scale of cash that's coming through. But I'm just saying that we have a lot of different complexity, and this position would help with that. They also are usually really good in process improvement. So the other thing that they can do, aside from looking at transactions, is that they can also sit down with a department and say, okay, tell me the process that you're doing for X, issuing tickets for sheriff's office or whatever it may be. And they can basically chart that process and really dig into the details and say well, this seems inefficient. What if we tried X, or what if we tried Y? And kind of try these different things to make processes better throughout the county as well. So that's kind of the other function that an internal auditor can also do.
And so the other piece that we see here too is ensuring that we're meeting, and this will get into the next position for grant accounting. We understand that the scrutiny on our compliance with federal requirements is probably going to be higher, and the risk of defaulting on any of those and losing federal funding, whether it be at the airport or other places, is high. So we want to make sure that we're resourced, we're running a really tight ship particularly now. Which brings us to the next, did that answer your question? The next position, which is grant accounting. We've been a lot more aggressive in going out and getting grants and succeeding in getting grants. All of these grants have different reporting requirements around them, sometimes that go well beyond the completion of the project. We have one grant accountant manager in finance right now. We're seeing that position maxing out. We're anticipating, again, with the number of federal funds and the FAA compliance issues associated with that, that we need to bump up that resource and capacity right now. That may be ongoing. We'd want to reevaluate that as we come to the end of the project and where we are with granting, if there's any of that left.
I was going to ask
the next
that.
4 or 5 years, yeah. And then pending AP payroll tech. Again, this is one we're not asking for right now. This will depend on how the project is implemented and what functions we're able to contract out. And what I'm particularly talking about is there going to be a ton of site logistics. If you think about the number of workers that need to check in, they actually have to go through screenings and security checks and such as they're coming in and out of the work site. We're going to have people there do that. We're looking right now at, do we have an opportunity to maybe contract and repurpose folks who are currently working at the airport who may be furloughed during that time. If we're able to do that as a contract with their current employer, that makes all the number of positions and FTEs and folks that we're paying a lot easier. We're cutting one check instead of maybe 60, 70 checks. But if it turns out that all of those logistics have to be temporarily hired by us as temporary employees, we may need another AP or payroll person during that time. But we don't know that yet. We're working to avoid that, so that's listed as a pending. Okay. Any questions or concerns on those? And I don't know, for the board, I'm bringing in numbers at the end of this, so I was going to wait to get like a thumbs up or thumbs down, but any conversation you want to have along the way.
I mean, I'll just comment like, wow, we've come a long way from not even having an airport controller.
I know, right?
Not that long ago. I do have some more global questions though, just about how these positions get divided between the airport fund or other funds. If we can parking lot that. Also, how, you know, if there's not capacity for all of these, what your prioritization thoughts look like. And I think that's it for now. Greg.
Very quickly, just cost inflation. We talk about that every time a project comes to us. How can we track that? I keep thinking we should have a big screen up on the wall and they're talking about how much more expensive everything is as we move forward. And I'm just wondering, I'm sure that's built in. Does that information need to come all the way up to us at times?
Yeah, those are going to be factors that we're going to be providing updates on. And that's why once you get to a certain point of design that, 40 to 60% design, we're looking at bringing our construction manager at risk on, because they will be able to provide real-time information about what they're seeing in the market for different materials, construction methods. It may be as we're in design, we want to do something that's more labor intensive because materials are so expensive. It may be that no, we actually want to put the money into materials because we can do something that's less labor intensive to try and manage. Design is going to matter a lot here, and the input of our construction manager at risk is going to matter a lot here, Greg. So that's why Brad, indicated, we have a healthy contingency in right now to account for that. Are we likely to use that contingency? Absolutely. How we manage that risk will be all these decision points as we go along.
And the other one was, the city's building a lumberyard project across the street. I don't know if the projects don't really sync up. They've already got a hole in the ground. Are they going to be done before we begin? So can we synchronize with them in some way?
Yeah, we're going to have to, I think there's going to need to be some deconfliction just generally within the community. We've got the projects that you've mentioned in the ABC there. I think we're going to see a lot of major construction projects ramping up in the urban areas, both in Snowmass and Aspen, trying to get them done while the airport's closed. So I think there's going to be a lot of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect question for joint meeting next Tuesday.
No.
So are all these costs wrapped into the soft costs of this number?
Yeah, we've escalated them through, midpoint of construction, and again, with our schedule, we're assuming it's gonna be done around 2030 for the terminal. So they're in there. The unknown is, we've made an assumption on the rate of inflation, and it could go better or worse than what we've assumed.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll know more as time goes by.
We still get to come to the ribbon cutting, even though they'll all be gone.
I just have a comment, sort of shock and awe, that how in the world did we get to a place where we're doing a project that's like 3 times our county budget? It's like really intimidating.
I agree. It is on the intimidating part. Look, part of how we got here is that we have gone through so much public process, so much community vetting, that what's happened is an airport would typically not do all these projects at the same time, right? We would not be rebuilding our terminal and our runway and our fixed-based operator at the same time. But because we've done so much due diligence and our infrastructure has gotten to the condition that it is, we don't have much choice. And it also makes some sense. We've got a window where most airports also, as busy as ours, are not single runway airports. And so we have a unique situation where we're going to have a closure to work with. That's kind of a golden opportunity to do some work in parallel. And so, that's the other reason. I think there's going to be some savings and mobilization and such as we get into planning. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know, Brad, if you have any comments
You're
on
spot
that.
on, John. This was a confluence of events that led to this that are all explainable, but it yields a very big number, and it's scary and intimidating.
Catastrophic synchronicity.
Catastrophic synchronicity. So I'm not going to go through the bullet points. You have these if you want to refer back to just some of the more specific functions for the internal auditor, the budget analyst, and grant accountant. I just wanted to see if there are any additional questions on those before we move on.
I should add to my comment, though, that the amount of work that you guys have put into this and the vision and reasonableness of the planning is really impressive. So thank you.
Thank you. So the good news is we got to bunch up the project implementation side, because most of that is really contracted out. And again, Kelly, it's still overseen by the Program Management Office, Executive Management, and ultimately the Airport Advisory Board and this board through implementation. But the runway design and engineering, you see some of the different roles that we anticipate being filled by the contractor, and as we go through contracting. Similarly with terminal design and engineering, we'll ensure that those roles are covered. in the contract, and that there's oversight through our project management office. Similarly with runway construction and terminal construction. FBO construction, we will need to have some expertise on that we're still figuring out right now to really oversee that they've made obligations to us around building performance, and we need to ensure FAA compliance and architectural kind of compliance with what we approve. And so we'll have those functions in there also.
Will the architecture of the FBO resemble the architecture of the terminal?
That's a really good question.
We there's going to be coordination, but not necessarily will they be the same kind of architectural what is the word I'm looking for?
They can complement one
Vernacular.
another. I think that's
Yeah.
I would suggest we have some scrutiny over that, just so it's not like the ugly duckling or something.
We will, and you'll be seeing those come back also, because the county has final approval on those plans, and so we've started those conversations with Atlantic Aviation. We're starting to see some of their planning. They have obligations to us on their planning. Right now, it's been more at the space reservation and how blocks are going to be organized so that they can move on to the architectural piece. But ultimately, we approve that before it's built also.
And it would be nice to have it complement, which is another benefit of
Just thinking
this all happening at once, right?
If you
We
have
can ensure that.
Frank Gehry on one end of the airport and Lorenzo Piano on the other, it'll just create a conflict.
I talked with
Commissioner-
Jonathan
He'd be famous
Reed
then.
about that, and they're going to be
If I could add-
presenting to the AAB as they come along.
Yeah, we're going to have presentations to the AAB. So we've started organizing that with Atlantic Aviation. It's another staff resource kind of time too. So
I'll just add, we had 11 architects propose on the terminal building, and 11 of 11 talked extensively about mass timber construction and biophilic design.
And what?
Biophilic design, I had to look it up, I didn't know. It incorporates nature
I know,
into the
yeah.
built environment. Yeah, you're smarter than I am. So I say that to just say I would highly doubt that they're going to come in with something that is not complementary to what is being considered, because just that's what the design community believes, no matter who they use.
Interesting.
So
That's pretty much what I was gonna ask, is more, they're gonna have to meet our energy efficiency, all those issues, but the green nature of what I think we're looking for the new terminal building for the airport, and you just answered the question, will hopefully be reflected in the new FBO.
yeah, and I think the concerns over getting locally sourced to the degree possible, mass timber is probably going to be what a lot of this is designed around.
Jackson-ish.
Better. So, and then you'll see the internal audit position again around the FBO compliance, as we talked about. I do want to talk a little bit about community development and inspections, because we do have a position requested here. We have the land use and zoning oversight. We do anticipate this will be a locations and extent request that has specific timelines associated with it, and ultimately this board makes the call with a supermajority vote. The building permit and inspections, we have our chief building official. We are looking for the addition of a senior plans examiner, so probably be along the lines of somebody with electrical inspection background and qualification to kind of really quarterback the building permit review. There are a number of specialties that we'd be looking to contract out for review of inspections. This includes the architectural and structural inspections. This would be both runway and terminal. the mechanical, electrical, plumbing kind of inspections. Again, this is going to be a scope of commercial project that we typically do not deal with. Runway inspections will have their own kind of unique expertise. And one of the areas that we flagged was fire inspections. We are coordinating with the fire district in terms of that's their responsibility as the fire marshal. We're looking to contract all of these functions and inspections out, both for timeliness and to bring the right expertise to the table. However, the senior plans examiner would be overseeing the coordination of all of this, as well as being able to do some of the plans review up front. We feel like we're pretty maxed out with where we are right now, and if you look at the dollar amount, this is almost a doubling of permit value in a year.
So would that position be term limited, or?
Potentially. I think what we would want to do, I know the board's had some concerns about backlogs, particularly on planning reviews and such. And so we'd want to look at how that position could maybe address those going forward.
I'm just seeing a lot of FTEs
Yeah, I know.
that are not part of, hopefully they'll come back during budget, because I'm kind of feeling fractured into how I'm thinking of FTEs related to this and FTEs related to the county in its entirety.
Yep, I
So-
understand.
I'm trying to keep an eye on it, and I'm getting lost in.
We'll talk about that. Well, let's circle it back at the
Okay.
end here. Yep. Then, in terms of community engagement and public information, there's two functions really happening here. One is there's going to be a lot of engagement, particularly up front, until we get to about, 30% design through conceptual design of the terminal. We're going to have heavy community engagement, particularly on the terminal and communication needs. We talked about the task forces that we want to set up around different concerns for design of the terminal. There's going to need to be opportunities for general input. There's going to need to be a lot of feeding that information up to this board as you're making decisions. That's the engagement side, and that's where we've really engaged GBSM and Kimley Horn to help us with that. Then there's going to be a heavy public information. How do we get information out both during the project and after the project? And what that is gosh, as we're going through different phases of the project, there's going to be a lot of differences in how the airport operates, where people can park, how they access it, where they can access it. How do you get to public transportation now that we've started phase 3F of the project and we've moved this sidewalk? So it gets very, very discreet in that kind of outreach space during the project. Additionally, post-project, just to pile on to your concerns here, Patty.
Bill, thank you.
We've got a lot of high expectations that came through the vision committee about how we are going to continually communicate our compliance with the, what's happening with emissions, what's happening with noise, how are we communicating the environmental leadership that we are exercising through how this terminal is constructed. How are we representing the local arts and community and character and all of that, plus just the constant, how are we encouraging transit? How are we getting information out about parking, those sorts of things. We've seen that the airport's taking up more and more of those ongoing information needs. Similar to open space and trails, it's probably one of our biggest areas of community focus. We just see that that need for constant, consistent messaging from the airport continuing, even after the project, but certainly during the project. And again, we can always reevaluate down the road. But we see the contracted public engagement as being critical, and then we see the public information piece for all those discrete issues that are going to be hitting us as being really, really critical to our success with the public in this project.
Kelly? Just where in the timeline is conceptual, the center of that, how far
That
down?
30%?
How many months or years away is that?
Probably 6 months away, plus or minus.
And that's why the engagement piece particularly made sense to contract and not look for a longer term.
It made me a little nervous if you said all the 11 architects came back with the same sort of general materials list. It made me nervous. I'm hoping we have some real visionaries and some inspirational things in there that don't make it look like your classic mountain vernacular. Somebody mentioned Jackson Hole Airport, and I thought, yeah, if it looks like every other ski resort airport, I think, is that a win? I don't know.
I am quite certain our community will have more input into the design of this terminal than maybe any other terminal on the face of the earth.
Probably, yep.
And I would say a majority of those designers recognize that we want something specific to here and not something that's already been done.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. I'm wondering when the public, to what is the public going to be responding when we first bring them in?
So
Everything?
we anticipate, no, we already have a good roadmap. We did a lot of work with the vision committee around what we want this terminal to represent. And so what we'd anticipate at the conceptual side, similar to what we did with this building, is that we'll have some, different kind of sketch designs of different ways that those visions could be achieved. Maybe it's 2 or 3 different kind of sketch options that are concepts at this point that we would be bringing both to the task forces that Meg was talking about, but also to the community in general to do whatever process that our public engagement folks come up with. Apparently my version of dotocracy is out of favor now, but there are different ways, right, for sorting through. Gosh, and what happened with this is the dialogue actually started with, well, we like this concept mostly, but we like this and this from these concepts. And so what generally happens is you come to like a fourth and final kind of concept that represents the community dialogue and comes through the airport advisory board and to you as a board of county commissioners as a, yeah, this hits the mark. This is the best compromise. We don't want to start from scratch because we won't get through it. Yeah, but I think we've got enough. We've had enough dialogue for good concepts to be developed at this point and for this community to have a good dialogue and move this forward. And that's how we're envisioning it going.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Rather than starting from scratch with the architects, everything will be based on the definitions of the common ground recommendations from what the adjectives that they used for the terminal or the various tasks that the terminal. So I really think it's going to be very important that we let the community know that that's going to be our base. As Brad has said, the holy grail is the common ground recommendations, and so we'll have the task forces build on that. And I know that's a little nebulous, but it'll be a basis rather than just throwing things out to the air.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I'm curious, on here we're talking about an 18-month community involvement process. Sorry, thanks, Sandora. We're talking about an 18-month community involvement process, but then on here we have, it looks like 21 I'm just curious what falls on the before either.
Yeah, these are rough numbers, but essentially it's an 18-month design process. And the community involvement will start out very significant and it will taper down as design progresses. The involvement comes out because you've made decisions, and that we've built in some time up front for a heavy community involvement process to figure out the best ways to integrate the common ground recommendations. That's what we got to figure out as we're going through here. But by the time we get
So what happens in
to
the extra time that we've built in on this timeline? I'm just
yeah, so
curious.
that's design, not community involvement. That's the full design process. So again, the community involvement will be very heavy at first, and then as we start making decisions, it will become less and less. Because by the time we get to 60% design, we're doing bathroom details and things that the community won't have input on at that point.
Okay. So is the community design process envisioned to start in this Q4 of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really that public input process will be most intense through the 30% design, because that's where the concepts and such, what it's going to look like and feel like and such. And then when you're getting into designing the dimensions of the cabinets and the doors and the meeting code, there's less value really at that point.
So I'm sure there will be opinions.
And you're expecting that
question.
to be about 6 months away, is that what you said?
I think it'll be completed within 6 months. We're going to start design in a couple of months, and the first 4 months of that is really getting basis of design and then into schematic design.
And at the schematic design level is where the public comes in?
No, they're involved
They're before that, okay,
before
great.
that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
That's when they start to taper the
Okay.
involvement
Right
down
up
after
front.
30%.
Okay, I see.
Right up front. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit just to talk about pending kind of positions. I think we heard a lot as we went through the design evaluation and such, the role information technology is certainly playing in terminals. We're also looking at how changes in information technology like AI that we're experimenting with now and such might change some of our systems and work processes going forward. We've got an overall assessment being done to look at what those needs might be. We would bring that back separately, but we are anticipating that our terminal that we exist in right now technologically is not very sophisticated for a terminal. We would expect that what we present to the community going forward is going to be much more sophisticated, but that will also be more complicated, and we'll probably need we'll need some management of those systems in order for them, as we see today, that these things don't always work the way they're supposed to. And so we don't know what that looks like yet. We'll bring that back. We're not asking for that, but just wanted to kind of flag that. And then pending HR tech, it is the same thing. If we're able to contract for all these logistics on the airfield during the project and at the airport during the project, it's a very, very different impact on our internal services than if we're hiring a lot of temporary employees to run those logistics. We want to see how those come out. Those would be term limited, though.
And will that be sort of dependent on how Jacobs and Daniels can handle that?
Well, it's not. I don't think this would
That
probably
falls under
fall
your
to
purview or
Jacobs and
something?
Daniels at this point. Honestly, I think we want to look at the vendors who are at the airport now, who may have to, close down for that 9-month period, or may have folks that they'd otherwise be furloughing, to see if we could contract with them to fulfill some of these functions.
I may just be able to supply on a smaller scale what we do with our security company now for the closure. Instead of furloughing those for the time, they actually help us with the gate and maintaining gate guards, so we're not paying the contractor to do that, and we're utilizing them so they have a job during that month closure for us.
So this is just specific to IT tech needs for, that's what that HR tech may or may not do.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
got it.
Yeah, and that's why it's pending. If we can figure out the contracting, we definitely don't need these
Yeah.
resources.
I have one more.
Oh, sorry, Patty, then Francie.
Yeah, so we currently have a space issue for employees at the airport. With the employees we have now that are being housed in modulars outside the building. Where are we gonna house these employees when we are gearing up? I mean, I don't mean where they live, I mean where they work, other
Yeah.
than the ones that are working from afar.
Yeah, they'll have construction trailers, they will have, we'll be using the AOC for design meetings and stuff, but there'll be people on site, they'll be bringing trailers to work out of every day. Their offices will be on site, construction trailers.
That's but what about ours? Where are we gonna put a new HR tech?
gonna have to be
Where are we gonna put new IT I mean, I'm talking,
It's gonna have to be the same kind of function, Patty, where we're gonna have to figure out temporary units. So we don't have the answer
Okay.
to those questions yet, but we'll have to answer them as part of the project logistics.
especially if we look at quote-unquote man cams. As we know, our airport land is a little limited in space, so we might need to be, and I think we will be very creative in our thinking when we have to try and figure out those things.
Abe, can you forward to that chart with the FTE
I think Francie
request?
had one question on
sorry.
this.
Just one really quick question. Do term limited FTEs get full benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. So what we have currently with FTE requests, and I want to start off with a general answer to Kelly's general question about, so how are these paid for between the funds? And so what we do is we have a cost allocation plan. It used to be OMB 087, but now it's changed to something else. But it's something that we're required to do for federal grants anyway. And so what we do now with positions that aren't directly paid by the airport is we have this cost allocation where folks track their time. So the airport actually pays part of my time. I submit a report on a periodic basis that says I spent roughly X% of my time at the airport, and then the airport is charged an overhead for my time, just like the landfill is and other functions. So it doesn't just fall all to the general fund. Right now, what we would look at doing is there's one airport position that would be directly paid that we did not get to, which is the contract administrator. I'm sorry, I think I skipped over that box. It's in there, which is to provide support to Diane's office on contract administration, provide another one of those checks and balances, Greg, that we were talking about earlier. But for the other positions, we have 3 positions that would be sitting in finance. Those would be funded through the cost allocation plan. So they'd be tracking time, and the airport fund would be charged proportionally for the amount of time that they're spending. And that's total cost of the FTE and equipment and all of those things. Similarly, community development would be a little bit different. We're going to be charging permit fees and such, just like we do other projects. Those tend to more than cover the cost right now of those. So there will be a permit fee that gets paid out of the airport fund, and that would come into the general fund. We anticipate those are definitely going to cover the costs of the contracting as well as this position. We are looking at the PIO being part of our overall communications and outreach. Just one, we want to have redundancy there so that when that person goes on vacation, we've got backups and that sort of thing, so we're organized. But that person would be 100% dedicated we'd anticipate a 100% reimbursement through the cost allocation plan. So you can see there are some. So for example, the internal auditor we're expecting during the project would be primarily dedicated to the airport and FBO and managing those processes. In the future, as they're doing more work, like if they're doing audits for the landfill, then those costs would be allocated to the landfill. If they're doing audits in general fund, they'll be allocated there. If they're doing audits for like human services, it'd be allocated there so that we could charge back appropriately the federal funds for, you know, those services. So that will change over the course, you know, after the project's done. But again, we'd anticipate a large percentage going to the airport because of the FBO, at least for example, on the auditor. The budget analyst, we do anticipate that being an overlap. We anticipate that hopefully that position is training to take over the budget director position if and when we ever let Connie actually retire. But hopefully that will be a long time from now, but we'd anticipate, guys anticipated that, you know, it'll probably be within this project time frame. So I want to pause there and just see if there are questions and concerns. We put a rough order of magnitude. We did build these costs into the project budget, and we have built these costs into the airport cash flow for the project at this point.
Questions, Jeffrey?
So appreciate the conversation. There's been very light, I guess maybe this is a question for online, for Cozen, but really we've lightly touched on the FAA involvement through the design and commissioning, as well as their potential financial assist on the rather large numbers in front of us. So I don't know if that's a Jessica question or a John question, but sort of two-part. One, on the operational approval side, where does the FAA come in terms of the whole process, but then also grants and you know, sort of top-down federal assist on these large numbers?
Yeah, so we're talking to the FAA about that. Their approval process typically comes through approving the ALP and then the environmental approval. While that does not guarantee their financial assistance, it is a requirement before you become eligible for their assistance. They are well aware of this upcoming request. They have given us every indication that their full support remains with this project, as it has been from the beginning. You may remember that this was their requirement that we do at least the airfield improvements. So we're anticipating significant, well over $150 million of federal participation in the airfield. On the terminal, it's much less, and their involvement is much less. Again, ALP and environmental approval, but that's sort of out of their area, other than what's eligible for PFCs. And they're going to be involved in the requirements, but it's much heavier on the airfield than the terminal.
Thank you. And then one follow-up. If, this is more of a dotting the i's, if there's a change in advisory circulars, we're not subject to those? We've got an approved ALP and we just move on?
No.
This is not a...
No, you're subject to every whim that they come up with, whether it's
Okay.
funded or unfunded. It's constantly a battle. We're not aware of anything that's in the offing right now that would affect this project, but that's not to say it couldn't happen. And those types of things typically come up and they get addressed, and the FAA, you know, if it's important to them, they'll find some money. There's an argument, but you know, I don't see anything significant relative to what we've been talking today that we can anticipate right now.
Can I just add to that real
Yes,
quick?
Patty.
Is that okay, Francie?
And then Francie.
It's my understanding that moving forward with design and et cetera for the terminal, we are trying to follow to the best of our ability, even better, what FAA would require of us if we were using FAA funds, so that when we get to a point where we can actually apply for them, we've already dotted all their i's and crossed all their t's to be in compliance with what they're gonna be needing. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Because I think that's critical when we go back, hopefully soon, to Washington, and Jessica, hopefully soon, we go back to Washington to find out about the availability of monies for both the terminal and the runway. So I think.
Yeah, it's a great point, Commissioner. Understand from a planning perspective, we are trying to be conservative and realistic. From a go get the money standpoint, we are always going to be there requesting money and demonstrating that we should be first in line for that money. So it's a good
I
distinction.
will remember that when I
Much
go
to
back.
that point, Patty, we try to put that in almost everything we do in case there comes an opportunity that we can accept federal funds for something.
Thank you.
Francie?
So are we eligible to submit a grant request when our EIS is completed, or?
Yes, the supplemental EA that we're doing right now, when that is completed, we will be eligible to apply for federal funding.
And your understanding from talking with whoever is at the FAA now, that will have greased wheels to a certain extent?
I think that's a fair assessment. I don't want this to sound nefarious, like we're greasing the wheels. We are providing them with information, and we are coordinating with them closely to be in a position where they will look favorably upon our project. And they have indicated to us from the beginning, for years now, that this would be a priority for their funding.
Yeah. Okay, so then we get maybe $150 million for the runways and project. But then that still leaves us with like $350 million for everything else, and we can't bond at $350 million. So what actually are we talking about here financially?
Yeah. We anticipate that there's going to be, one, we've got other grant sources. So when we look at a multimodal transportation center, for example, that will allow us to tap into other grant resources, potentially through Department of Transportation, now build grants, I think they are.
Build grant?
We also have some hard dollar commitments in addition to the ongoing revenues through Atlantic that we'd be bonding through. We have some capital commitments from Atlantic that would help us complete the airfield portion. And, we will continue to look at it. It's not just the FBO. So when we presented initial financing numbers to you, we were looking solely at FBO revenues. We weren't looking at our other revenue sources, a lot of which can be changed. So a major part of this expense, for example, is going to be parking structures. We are likely going to have to increase our daily parking fee, and you're able to bond against that. Our parking fees are very, very low.
But all our
right
bonds
now.
will still be revenue bonds. Everything
They
that you
will
have
still
to be
be-
revenue bonds.
They'll still be revenue bonds. They're not going to be general obligation bonds of the county. So we're anticipating a higher interest rate. Whether that looks more favorable because it's diversified, even within the airport, we don't know yet. That's what our municipal advisor will be telling us when we bring them on board.
So the $105 million bond or whatever that they were projecting from the FBO will go
Yeah.
up.
That's pledging that was based on
Yeah, the
pledging
$18 million,
$18
right.
million of FBO revenues, which is a healthy chunk of change. But we are going to have other revenue
Right,
streams
so
that we
that
did not.
estimate will go up.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, sorry,
If you want
please.
to wrap, I was sort of thinking of kind of a next steps. type
Yeah,
of,
so
when
next
are we
steps-
going to hear about sort of when things are going to come back to us along these lines?
Well, so I want to clarify that question. I think what we were looking for today is direction to bring forward these positions in a budget supplemental request so that we can start to fill these needs as we go into the project. And so That was our ask. Right now, it'd be staff's recommendation that we bring the positions that are on the chart in front of you for approval as a budget supplemental. And Kelly, I don't know if that was a question or if you're asking a more global question as far as, so when is all this design stuff coming back to us and such? So
Yeah, I guess I was asking even a more global question of like, when do we talk about, our bonding questions? When do we hear the first report from the municipal advisor on what that package might look like?
So we are looking, I believe, I'm looking at Ann here, but she's not looking at me. And as far as our municipal advisor, so we're out to RFP now. I think we're looking more towards the end of the second quarter as far as bringing some of that information back through them.
Kelly,
'Cause
can I?
we haven't,
Yes,
yeah,
But we need to notify the clerk's office in June,
that we have an
that we
intent to put a
might
question
possibly
on.
be bringing
Yeah.
forward a bond question.
Correct.
To just, whether or not we do can be determined later, but we need to let them know we're thinking about it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, the pending positions we've already approved and they just haven't been hired? And
No,
then
no, these are ones that we're not bringing forward, but we want you to have a heads
Okay.
up on that we may bring these forward. So you don't say, why didn't you talk to us about this when you came to us the first time? So we can say, hey, we think we might need these, we don't know, so we don't want to ask for them right now.
Okay. And then these other positions for the FTE request, we'll have the opportunity to get a little clearer detail as to the total numbers from the general fund when next week, I think 2 weeks, when Connie comes for second quarter budget supplementals.
I'm not sure if the plan is to bring them with the second quarter supplemental request or as a separate out-of-cycle.
Got it. Okay.
We talked about maybe bringing them out of cycle since
Okay.
it's such a big.
And I would like to request
Yes,
as part
Patty.
of that, I'd like to see what the departments like HR, what in finance, what your capacity is now, how many employees you have, kind of ballpark as to, is everybody too busy to take any of this on that's already staffed? We have a lot of people in a lot of seats, both in finance and HR, and I want to make sure we're fully utilizing people's time to the best of our ability before we start bringing in more people and being redundant.
We can bring back more information when we do present a resolution.
That's what I'm asking.
But I would like the board to know that this is the culmination of a few months of discussion already as to what staff's capacity is, where are we at, what can be absorbed, and what can't.
And I appreciate that, but we need to hear that before we're the ones, because we're the ones who are giving the nod for the hiring and the paying of the people, and I want to make sure that we have at least some of that information, so I feel comfortable moving
Yep.
forward.
And Brad has a flight to catch, so he's gonna have to, I
The
told him he'd
airport's
be out of
closed,
here
I
by
just
11.
got
Sorry, can't get there from here.
That one from Aspen is gonna be late, Brad, I'll just tell you.
The pass is open, I think.
Thank you, Brad, for
4
coming
o'clock,
out.
I think. Maybe they've already.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brad.
Motorcycles?
I know.
All right, because we still have an exec session to have. Are there other questions on this? A lot to think through, for sure. Jeffrey?
I just want to thank Brad and Abe for the
Yeah, thanks,
diligence
guys.
on this and sort of the operational considerations across so many buckets. So appreciate your time and effort on this.
Yeah, thank you, Abe.
It's always great to see you, thanks.
I just wanted to
Yes.
chime in. It gives me a high sense of confidence. This is really thorough and it's precise, as Meg pointed out. It's beautifully laid out, and so anybody who really spends time with it will understand it. And so I'm coming away with a sense of confidence and inspiration that we're on track. So it's really nice to have everything going perfectly right now.
We do realize this is the largest project since the Glenwood Canyon on the western slope, so it is a massive undertaking,
Yeah.
led well by an excellent county manager.
But I'm regretting Glenwood Canyon.
and and so much is done at risk, but with good data. So
Now, all we need, though, is the money to do it, and that's gonna be a big hurdle ahead of us.
And a lot of people.
Well, yeah, we have a little more control over those lot of people right now, I think, than we do the money, but the money we need to start working on.
All right. Okay, well, I think we're done with the work session component of our, may I borrow your agenda so I can read the citation for going into exec session? And thank you to all the staff that has contributed to this, and Meg for your endless hours. I feel like, are you one of the positions here on
I know,
here?
Meg's
Like,
been
we should-
amazing. She's really
honorary, project manager up here. Okay, so I am going to call a special meeting for the purposes of going into executive session to discuss federal grant assurances discussion with our counsel for the purpose of receiving legal advice pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes 24-6-4024B. Thank you, Francie.
Second.
Thank you, Greg, at 11:26. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are we going upstairs for this?